I'd like to call to order the Clarkston Independence District Library Board of Trustees meeting for June 14, 2021 at 6:30.
Jan Gaffney.
Here.
Dan Green.
Here.
Allison McAdam-Kiesling.
Here.
Nancy Moon. Here. Marilyn Pomeroy.
Here.
Ann Rose.
Here.
Chris Schall.
Here.
Here.
Excellent. I'll accept a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda be accepted as presented. Any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Motion is approved. Call to the public. Hello, public.
Well, most of you probably know that on June 5th, we had a very successful outdoor book sale. We took in $5,430 plus.
Excellent.
And so it was amazing in terms, and then the other thing we did was give the seniors from Clarkston High School a voucher for a free book. And it was amazing. I think we had about 40 students, but they were so thoughtful and careful about picking their book. It turned out really good, I thought. Our reading market, which is our online book sale, from December through May, we've taken in $1,267. We've had donations of $195, and we've sold 701 books. We're currently discussing having an indoor book sale this fall in this room like we used to. And book donation dates right now are June 16th, July 7th, and July 21st. Thank you.
That was succinct. Thank you, Laura. Any comments or questions for Laura?
Comments only. A great job. You guys are really working hard, and that was a lot of people for the first book sale. And to do it outside, I think that's really good.
And it was hot. You did a nice job despite the heat. But at least it did not rain.
It did not rain.
And if you waited till afternoon, there was more shade.
That's what I.
Yes, but then the books are picked over.
That's true. Everything has its pluses
Yeah.
and minuses. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to present the consent agenda. There are 5 items. Does anyone need to ask a question about any of them? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Library Director's Report.
The first item, earlier this year, Jean Molzen, who was a longtime friend of the library, instrumental in reestablishment of the library and a trustee on the library board, passed away. Jean was also a very active member of the garden club, so in lieu of flowers, the family requested that people plant something in their own gardens. The library has added a Julia Child Floribunda rose bush to the right of the main entrance of the library. A medallion will be added indicating that it is in her memory. As is library tradition, we also added a book to the collection, including a book plate recognizing that it is in Jean's memory. The selected title is a picture book called Nia and the New Free Library by Ian Lendler. When Little Town Library is destroyed by a tornado, it seems like book-loving Nia is the only one who cares, so she starts the New Free Library under the tree where she used to read and inspires the entire town to read and work together, eventually all pitching in to build a new library. The story seemed like a good fit for Jean's ability to inspire community involvement in support of the library she loved.
Very nice.
It's such a cute book, such a cute book. And it just happened to be published, came out, I opened it and I said, well, this is the book that Jean gets. So it was just perfect. It was meant to be. Okay. In May, the library staff that work with the public attended a virtual training provided by Culture City. This is a certification program led by trained medical professionals on how to recognize those patrons with sensory needs and how to handle a sensory overload situation. Sensory bags equipped with noise-canceling headphones, fidget tools, verbal cue cards, and weighted lap pads will also be available to patrons who feel overwhelmed by the environment. We will have signage identifying our organization as being sensory inclusive, with resources available as well as a space in the library identified as a sensory safe zone for anyone who may feel overwhelmed.
Where is that going to be?
It will be the conference room in the corner. And I think that it may become one of the study rooms after we fully reopen, but right now the conference room is a good space for that. Next item, I have once again been invited by the Library of Michigan to be part of a peer review team for a mid-sized Library Services and Technology Act, which is LSTA grants. Orientation took place last week, and the teams will meet via Zoom to review grants and make recommendations in July for projects that should be funded later this year. I was part of this project in 2019 and was invited back in 2020, but due to the pandemic, the 2020 program was postponed, and the selection process was handled in a different way. This was a very interesting project to work on, providing a great deal of insight into the review and selection process for major grant awards. So I was glad that they invited me to come back. It's really interesting. It's a fun project. Next item, on Saturday, June 12th, the library held the 2021 Summer Reading Kickoff Program, in which we have a fun event and encourage all ages to sign up to read with us this summer to win prizes. The activity of the day was an animal safari in which kids visited 6 local parks and unscrambled a clue in order to locate a large safari animal cutout. After listing what animal they found at each location, they could turn in their sheet for a prize. Participation was great, and nearly 200 people signed up to read with us this summer already. In addition, families could also sign up for our I Love My Library Prize Patrol, sponsored by Bowman Chevrolet, Vibe Credit Union, and the Friends of the Library. Each household may pick up a sign to put in their yard. Each week, we will visit 5 homes. If their sign is in their yard, when we stop by, we will leave a gift basket valued at $100 on their porch. The first 5 gift baskets were already awarded to lucky families this morning.
So, what kinds of things do you include?
There are gift cards to local
Yeah.
businesses,
Okay,
and
great.
yeah. Yep.
Wow. Very nice.
Yes.
I saw on Facebook this afternoon a couple of the recipients,
Mhm.
as requested, posted
Oh,
photos of
good.
receiving their gifts. It was very nice.
Yeah, so we'll do 5 every week for the next 9 weeks.
Oh, very good.
And I noticed on the way here, I drove past several homes that had their signs out, clearly visible in their front yards. So that was nice.
We were very excited because the signs started, people picked them up on Saturday, and when I left the library on Saturday evening, there were already signs all over town. So people put them in their yards immediately, and those lucky 5 families this
Yeah.
morning did get their,
Yeah.
did get their goodies, so they took it seriously, right into the ground, those signs.
So do we still have some?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So if you haven't picked up your sign, stop by the library and sign up for a prize. And then the last thing is just the book sale, which Laura covered really well, so, and she gave you more detail than I did, so. I will let her description of the book sale stand.
Okay, any comments or questions?
The animal safari was a lot of fun. I did it. To take pictures. The best picture was the tiger at along the beach there at whatever the lake is called.
Deer Lake. or
Deer Lake. Yeah, that was the best position.
Was it? Okay.
The tiger was sort of nestled into some tall grass and
Nice.
Very good. So they did have to look a little bit.
he did. The one in Clintonwood was very difficult to find.
The challenge.
Very.
And other ones were easy. We tried to do a little bit of, because we knew some of the kids would be older and some of the kids would be younger. So we're hoping the big kids help the little kids. And,
I think the parents enjoyed it also.
Well, it was really a clever idea.
Yeah, very.
It was.
Very cute.
Yeah.
It worked out really well because normally we have a big event on site. And a lot of times it's anywhere from 300 to 600 people and we just didn't feel like that was a safe thing to do, especially when we were planning this weeks ago. So we got this clever idea that if we could spread them all over the community, and we did borrow the idea, something that Ori and Parks had done. They had done a little scavenger hunt where they sent everybody to the parks. And so what we did is a little different, but the idea was if we sent them out into the world, you didn't have to go to the parks in any particular order. And so
Right,
people were all over
it
town.
spreads that. And so what if you stole the idea? If you see a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and they did theirs last fall. It's not like we did it the same weekend or anything.
Now, that would have been
Yeah.
not good, but.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And we did have a virtual, I should have mentioned that. We had a virtual version for kids who may not have had a ride to go to all the parks. There was a video that you could watch online, and it basically, I believe it's a camera sort of pans across, and you had to watch for the animal in the video and try and catch it. So
Okay, so everyone could participate.
everyone, and they have until June 30th to pick up their prize.
Okay,
So if you want to do it online, you still can.
all right. Regular business. Let's get our normal COVID update.
COVID update, okay. So the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, MIOSHA, guidelines were updated May 21st of 2021. And this includes the following guidance. Promote frequent hand washing or hand sanitizer, require employees experiencing COVID symptoms to stay home, maintain COVID-19 cleaning protocols in accordance with the latest CDC guidelines using EPA-approved disinfectants, continue to conduct a daily health screening for employees and contractors entering the workplace, and maintain records for 6 months. Require employees to wear masks except fully vaccinated persons when they cannot consistently maintain 6 feet of social distance. Provide non-medical grade face coverings to unvaccinated employees. Post signage in work areas reminding employees who are not fully vaccinated to wear face coverings and maintain appropriate distancing. Now, in terms of this last one, there were some other options. One option was to keep records of all employee vaccinations, so requiring people to turn in a copy of their COVID card. Or we could allow remote work. Or we could continue to require masks and distancing of all employees regardless of vaccination status. So what I did when this particular set of guidelines was released, I called our attorney, and my intention, I had actually spoken to, well, obviously, as you know, the library directors basically meet every week. The TLN directors meet 1 week, and then on the opposite week, all of the library directors in the state of Michigan meet. So every week I have a meeting with some group of library directors. And one of the libraries had an interesting plan where they were going to have a form that was an opt-out of wearing a mask. So you would fill out a form saying that you were fully vaccinated, turn in a copy of your COVID card, and then you could unmask. And so I called the attorney and I said, this is an interesting idea, I'm thinking of doing this. And he said, don't. So, okay, what should I do? And he said, you should post signs. You should not require proof of vaccination. MIOSHA is moving away from placing the employer in a parental role. If we start to maintain vaccination records, we must continue to follow the HIPAA guidelines and use appropriate records retention. And he said, given the fact that they are talking about lifting all restrictions July 1st, we would be setting ourselves up for a lot of work for a very short period of time to keep things in place. And it was his recommendation, and I kept kind of trying to talk him around it and say, well, you know, I should do this. And he said, why exactly do you want to do this? And it was his recommendation that we not. So that's why this is the method that we are doing. Let's see. So in terms of the Phase 5 services, the Phase 5 services are basically the same as they have been. Because we now know that fomite transmission is very unlikely, libraries are beginning to release that quarantining of materials. That ended today. So our indoor book drop is now open. And we have put out the newspapers again. Newspapers are something that we had off the floor because that's a browsing item that people sit and look at for long periods of time. We know that foam mite transmission on, especially rough paper like that, is extraordinarily low, almost impossible. So we went ahead and put the newspapers back out. We raised our occupancy limit in the main public area to 30 people from 25 to allow people to sit in the lounge furniture so that they can enjoy the newspapers. 30 people is still well below the 50% occupancy limit on the main part of the building. The occupancy limit in the main part of the building is actually more like 45. So at 30, not only do we have room for 30 patrons, but we also have plenty of room for any employees that may be in that area as well. Let's see. Anything else that has changed on here that I meant to mention?
So we socially distance the furniture.
It already was,
Yeah.
in its normal, we're still not letting people sit at the tables and the chairs in the main part of the building. We still have this space being used as study space, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We are not closed on Sundays, so obviously we're not doing Sundays. Let's see. And that's pretty much everything else is the same. We're maintaining the rest of it. We are adding outdoor programs this summer, whereas everything has been virtual up until this point. Now we have virtual and some outdoor. But at this point, we're not really talking about indoor programs quite yet. We have to wait and see what comes. It sounds like the intention is potentially to lift all restrictions on July 1st. Just wait and see what happens with that. So then in terms of basic guidelines, we are still having people stay home if they're sick, obviously. Wear their face mask unless they're fully vaccinated, wash hands frequently, maintain 6 feet of social distance unless fully vaccinated, clean frequently, touch surfaces often, and of course be kind to one another. And then similarly for the patrons, please wear a mask unless fully vaccinated. And it is not appropriate for us to ask the patrons when they enter whether or not they are vaccinated, so that's an honor system. But we do have signage posted. So the other thing that I've included in your packet for the board only, this is an email that I sent out to staff, kind of addressing, making sure that people understand that asking each other about vaccination, this is a medical, a private medical decision, and it is inappropriate for them to be asking each other. As the employer, I may ask that question, but as staff member to staff member, they need to be very respectful of the privacy of others. So I put out a reminder regarding that. And then the last thing I have in your packet is this choosing safer activities, which is something that I posted in the staff room, also made available to staff on more than one occasion. And this is a listing of a variety of activities. This was put out by the CDC. On the right-hand side, it shows a little green box with a smiling person with no mask, and these are all the things that a fully vaccinated person can do. And then on the other side, it talks about unvaccinated people and what they are permitted to do unmasked, when they should, and yellow means it's less safe and they should be masked, and red is least safe, and it's definitely a mask thing. So we have that available for the staff, and we can talk about that as well. So, any questions about that? Okay.
You're getting there.
It is what it is.
Slow process.
It's a process. Normally, when I have staff come in to do a presentation, I usually put them first on the agenda. The reason that I put Chris and his fine conversation second was because I wanted you to know that we had lifted quarantine on the materials. So part of the reason that you were doing fine-free was because the 5-day quarantine period was really creating all kinds of havoc with the coming and going of materials.
So number two,
So number 2 is all about
discussion of waiving fines. So we have our circulation director here to share his thoughts with us on this item.
So I'm going to go ahead and just do the quick summary for the public of what's in the packet, and then I will turn it over to Chris. So due to the pandemic, the library board voted to waive library fines for overdue materials through June 30th of 2021 to address the issue of the significant delay of check-in of materials due to the COVID quarantine process. As a clarification, this waiver only includes fines of materials that have not been returned past their due date. Fees incurred for lost or damaged items are still in effect. Quarantine protocols have now ended, and the end date for waiving fines is approaching. At the May 17, 2021 meeting, the library board initiated a discussion regarding how to proceed with library funds. There are a number of libraries prior to the pandemic that had been eliminating late fees as a standard policy, as there is data indicating that their intended purpose, getting patrons to bring their materials back in a timely fashion, may not actually assist with that. The board had many questions about this idea, expressed interest in hearing more about the pros and cons of the policy, and requested a presentation at the June meeting. So our head of circulation will provide a presentation on his findings on the topic to assist the board in the discussion.
Take it away. It's like a homework assignment.
Evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
A little taller. Okay, so this presentation is really by no means an endorsement or a refutation of fine free. It's just sort of an info gathering type of thing. Thanks. So what are fines for? According to this individual, the charging of token library fines is a way to communicate to the public that libraries matter. That's Sue Epstein, library director at Sexton B. Little Free Library in Columbia, Connecticut. Fines are a tangible reminder of the patron's responsibility, the library's importance, and the consideration of others. Now, that's been the traditional standard outlook on fines for the last 100 some odd years. Thanks. So why go fine free? More and more library professionals contend that charging overdue fines undermines the mission of libraries to provide free and equitable access to information so that all citizens may educate themselves. Which is basically what I call the barrier to service argument. According to the Communications Director of the Urban Libraries Council, overdue fines don't distinguish between people who are responsible and those who are not. They distinguish between people who have or do not have money. It's a pretty black and white way to look at it. On the right here from our eliminating fines presentation that we watched, the idea is that economically disadvantaged neighborhoods have lower circulation rates. Parents are reluctant to check out books for their children. For fear of fines, transportation and financial burdens disproportionately affect low-income residents. None of that is untrue. I've worked in a library that was in an area like that, and I have seen that. Go ahead. Thanks. So this is just the information I was able to find on median household income in Clarkston, and then Independence Township. So this is my view on what the barrier to service argument fails to take into account. Patrons are still able to use the library, even when they're unable to borrow items. This is something I think is lost in the argument. You know, the doors are still open, people can still come in and read and use the computers and what have you. I don't think there are many libraries left that penalize people with overdue fines by not allowing them to use their computers anymore. I think that's pretty much over. Borrowing items is an implied social contract. That means patrons are agreeing to return items so other patrons can borrow them as well. This is especially true of new items. Fine-free can be seen as a penalty to those who do borrow and return items responsibly. And in my view, fine-free negates the purpose of a circulation department. Circulation is more than a stock and checkout department. We also function as the rule enforcing arm, which is a role many librarians are uncomfortable with performing. Fine-free is one less method for doing that, and in effect it removes a lot of our authority. Also, the deterrent argument is a misrepresentation. Fines are a negotiating tool for us. So they function well in incentivizing people to bring back items they've been charged for because they're easily waived, and it creates a more positive experience. We're in the business of getting our stuff back, not collecting fines. These are the results of some informal polls I created for my staff just to see where they were on the list. It's kind of fuzzy, so I have the printed off version also. The basic question, do you think CID should go fine free? I have 9 clerks. 4 said yes, 2 said no, 3 are undecided. So it's not like a landslide in either direction, obviously. I was kind of surprised. I thought I was going to get a lot of yeses, but I didn't. In my opinion, fines are. So 4 of them felt it's a fair practice that should be applicable to all patrons, regardless of status. 3 felt necessary in order to ensure that our items are returned. 3 felt it was useful. 2 thinks they're outdated and no longer useful. 1 thought it was a form of punishment or embarrassment, and 1 saw it as a tool used to punish the poor. So these are options that, and features that help patrons avoid fines. Patrons can monitor their accounts online. They can call or they can stop in to determine if items need to be returned. The auto renewal, which is up to 2 times, helps patrons not have to worry about due dates, at least not right away. And, yeah, exactly.
Love it.
Yeah, yes. That's saved me more than once.
And manual renewals can be done online by patrons, or they can call and request them. So if they're not comfortable with waiting for that auto renewal, they can do it themselves, or have us do it. What some other libraries have done, instead of going fine-free, amnesty programs where patrons can return items without penalty on certain dates, sometimes involving several consecutive weeks. Reading programs where minors can read off their debt. I don't know how comfortable I am with it. I feel like that's like a friendly version of debtor's prison.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the way that feels. The Redford Township District Library, which I used to work for, installed LED lighting, which reduced the electric bill enough to offset the loss of revenue from fines. So it's all sorts of ways that people have done away with them. My recommendation, I feel fine-free is a more complex issue than its proponents would like to believe. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It seems to me like something that's always cited as working really well in major metropolitan areas where there's lots of poverty and different socioeconomic statuses going on, whereas we're in a different situation here. At this point, I recommend that we extend the fine-free status to the end of August, because summer reading just started, and I think it would just cause more confusion and stress for everybody, and then revisit the issue right before fall.
Chris, can we get copies of your research there? Your
Absolutely.
Surveys and stuff?
Yeah,
I'd like to have
absolutely.
that.
Sure.
Is it worth polling the public on this, asking them what they think?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's ever a reason not to.
Yeah,
To
just
see where they
curious.
are on that, yeah. We got a lot of people who come in expecting to still owe fines right now, so
Right.
it'd be interesting to see what they think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think my issue is mainly with new materials.
Mhm.
If the whole public would like to read them,
Mhm.
then you take out the brand-new material, and then you just keep it all summer.
Mhm.
That negates the focus of a library, which is a gathering together of materials
Mhm.
so that everyone can read them.
Yeah, by the time it comes back, it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the other side of that argument that, that you're punishing people by making them do that. Otherwise, you're punishing the people who can't get the materials. If it's supposed to be available for everyone,
Right.
that includes the people who are waiting for the books as much as it
Mhm.
includes the people who already have them.
And
So
everyone's,
just to try to
everyone's
find that
tax
balance.
dollar is purchasing.
Exactly.
That's the whole goal of
Yeah.
libraries, is that we all share our resources
Mhm.
so that these materials are available for all of the community. So I don't want to punish people, but I also want people to
Yeah.
actually utilize a library as
Mhm.
intended.
And I think maybe we could consider some, although then it gets complicated for the staff, so you can jump right in here if you don't think this is a good idea, but to have different levels of fines on newer and older materials.
Julie and I have actually talked about that as a possibility.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
something to consider, because that is the ones that you're gonna have people waiting for, and it's, not having fines can then punish that other group of people, so it's tricky to find the balance.
Mhm.
Well, I think what Chris is recommending is that we extend the fine-free status through August so that Julie and Chris and others can develop a policy. And I would like to see some board representation on any committee or whatever that defines this new policy. Because I like Jan, I see that this is we don't have to be like every other library.
Mhm.
We can do something entirely different that nobody's ever tried before. But it's got to be talked about and talked out and thought out, and we can't do that right here today. But I'm ready to make a recommendation that we follow I'm ready to make a motion that we follow his recommendation and extend the fine-free status through August.
I would second that motion.
I have a question for John, though.
Sure.
Thank you. My understanding, Chris, is that fine-free, it actually isn't ultimately, because at some point it's going to be due. I mean, we think in terms of this as being fine-free. And I like the idea, I'll be honest, I like the idea of fine-free.
Okay.
But at some point, there is going to be a fine. So I think that that's something that can get lost in this conversation, which is, we're saying the word fine-free, but ultimately,
not true.
it's not really fine-free. It's really an extended checkup of some materials is what it is. Because at some point, we're going to say, you have to bring it back at whatever X date, because then it's at a lost status.
Yeah, my previous director at Redford always would say to us, because we went fine-free there, he said, you've got to stop thinking in terms of fines and start thinking in terms of fees.
Right.
So it's a lost fee versus a late fine.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of patrons understand that, and so when they get hit with that lost fine, because there are no, lost fee, because there are no late fines anymore, all of a sudden it's, well, wait a minute.
Right.
I thought there were no fines, why do I owe $60 for this audiobook?
Because you have to return the book at some point.
Yeah.
But I loved the auto renewal,
Mhm.
so that you have an opportunity, if you have several items and
Right.
something comes up, or especially during COVID, where the library will inform you that you still have these items, that they have been extended, and then if someone has a hold on it, don't they also say that?
It doesn't say it has a hold on it, it just tells them that it didn't renew.
Okay.
Yeah, or that it's like not eligible for
Mhm.
auto
Not
renewal or
eligible.
something.
But that
Yeah.
tells the person that somebody's waiting for that item.
Our staff lets them know when they check things out that it won't renew if somebody else is
Right.
waiting for the item. So we've been educating the public, we have scripts that we use, we've been educating the public about that. When libraries started talking about this whole fine-free concept, I felt like I wasn't ready to take that leap. And so that's why I went looking at auto renew. And we were actually one of the early libraries to take on auto renew. Because to my mind, most of the time when people have fines, it's because they put the book in the car, on the seat of the car, they go run their errands, they get home, pull the car in the garage, and realize the book is still sitting on the seat of the car. So instead of punishing the person, we extend it, they get to come back the next day, we count it as a circulation, because as far as we're concerned, they checked it out again. So, they get the extension, they don't get the fine, we count it as being another usage of the book, and it's kind of a win-win situation. So one of the things that we had talked about, Chris and I, about this whole thing was more about, because we have this auto renew, and so we did see a big drop in our fines, and the patrons have been very happy with that. They very seldom, when they walk up to us, say, oh, I'm sure I owe money, and they don't, because they don't even realize auto renew took place. That we could talk about the possibility of lowering some of the fines. One of the ones that is, that adds up really quickly are late movie fees.
Yeah.
So at $1 per movie, if you check out a half a dozen movies, which is the limit, you might owe $6 if it's one day overdue. So, I mean, those are hefty prices because they add up really quickly, whereas the book at 15 cents don't add up nearly as quickly. So we talked about the possibility of trying to balance that.
Yeah, because the goal is circulation.
Right.
We want to circulate the materials.
Right.
Right.
And so we want everyone to have a possibility, like Jan says, of being able to see something new when it's still relatively
Right.
new. So I think, as you can tell, we're open to that. And as you know, we'd like to have a board member on almost every committee staffing and hiring and so forth. So we like to have board members involved so that someone on the board is knowledgeable about the various issues that we're dealing with. And so,
Well, and sometimes I think a board member, we come at it from a different, some of us are librarians or past librarians, but some of us are not.
Mhm.
And so we're coming at it from a different point of view sometimes.
yeah,
I come at it as a user with some background in government
A
finance, so.
lifelong user. A lifelong library user.
Yes, yes.
So we have a motion to pursue this idea, and that our head of circulation and our library director will confer, and a board member who is fascinated with this subject will volunteer to join them. How's that?
So the motion, as I wrote it down, is to extend fine-free status through the end of August. Through the end of August. Dan, did you have more specific that you wanted in that motion?
No, I was just gonna add and take up the issue at the August meeting.
And take up the issue at the end, okay. Take up the issue.
And the other things that Marilyn mentioned, I think are things that Marilyn herself can point a finger or ask for a volunteer or whatever.
Yes. If you have a volunteer join a board volunteer to join the
Do you
discussion.
want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, let's try reading that again. So we can.
The motion was to extend fine-free through the end of August and take up this issue at the August meeting.
Okay, and the nitty-gritty aspect is fine. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions about this issue? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Thank you.
So it's going to be discussed, and Allison has volunteered to share the board's position, or board, yes.
That's right.
Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome.
Now to the fun we always have with our fire suppression system.
Well, as you know from the email I sent you, we had a fire issue on Memorial Day. Actually, the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, excuse me,
Yes.
Yeah,
I jumped out of order.
Oh, the first quarter, you're right, sorry. I'm sorry.
I am sorry. Let's
And
back
I
up a
just
moment.
followed along and flipped the page. Okay, so the follow-up on the first quarter financial review. I put this in the packet because one of the questions that came up was regarding the telephone bill. So at the May 17th, 2021 meeting, the library director reviewed the first quarter financials. A question came up regarding item 853 telephone. The budget is $5,500, and the amount expended at the end of the first quarter was $3,366. This is significantly more than the $1,375 that would be the expected expenditure by the end of the first quarter should we be spending it evenly month by month. The board requested a follow-up to see if there was an error or if this line is significantly underfunded. So here's what I found out when I looked at it more closely, and thank you for pointing it out because I had just sort of breezed over this up and didn't notice that one. There is a portion of our phone service that is funded using an escrow account. So enough money to pay the bill for the entire year is placed in a secure holding account, and the monthly amount is deducted and wired to the company providing the service. Therefore, what would be expected, the full amount has already been expended from the library budget, making it appear lower than expected. But the vendor receiving the payment still receives those funds on a monthly basis. Should anything happen to that vendor or the library decided to make a change to the service plan, any remaining money in the escrow account would be returned to the library. So the remaining funds in line 853 telephone are sufficient to pay the other portions of the telephone costs for the remainder of the year. And this was a piece that when we switched over our phone system, we did it late in the year, so we didn't really notice that. And so this year when we looked at this budget and this big chunk of money went out, we hadn't seen it. So it's because it's just the way it worked last year that we didn't see it happen.
I'm just curious, because that's not a very traditional way of doing that. Is there a reason why that was put in an escrow account?
It's becoming more common.
Okay.
It's something to do with the fact that the company that is supposed to be getting the money wants to ensure that we're good for it.
Oh, wouldn't we all like that?
Yeah,
It's because
I'd like to sign up for it.
Well, it's because the company that we use provides business phones. The company that we've been using before, they were phones that were provided for governmental entities. And this year, when we bid out our phone system, we didn't necessarily just go with companies that specialize in governmental entities, which are usually good for the money. But businesses are, especially small businesses, may or may not be as reliable. And so there are companies now that are creating these escrow accounts to ensure that they're not installing these super expensive phone systems in a business, and then the business goes bust 6 months later, and they're left holding the bag, so.
And of course, I'm more familiar with government entities, so
As
I knew that wasn't a traditional.
Which is why, when I saw this, I thought, wait a minute, what happened here? So, yeah. And I had forgotten when we did it, because that was at the end of 2019, and then last year, of course, the phone bill was very unusual because we weren't really in the building as much as
Right.
people, and that, so.
Right.
So thank you for answering that
Yeah.
query.
I just wanted to make sure it was officially in the notes, because I didn't want to just have somebody see that we had had this discussion in a meeting and then I breezed past it at this meeting, so. Okay.
Excellent. Now to the fun of fire suppression.
Now to the fun fire suppression. Okay. So just, I didn't put it in my director's report, but just as a reminder, on the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, we had a power outage. Apparently a transformer over on East Lawn was blown, and the power went out. It's a long story, I'm going to make it as short as possible. Essentially the power went out, and because there was no power to the compressor that keeps our dry, you all know about this, the dry system, it has to be pressurized, whatever. Well, we know it has a slow leak, it's an old system. So when the power was out for an extended period of time, the compressor was not pressurizing it appropriately, and it essentially deflated and it armed because the power was out. Unfortunately, when it arms like that, we have to bring in a professional to drain it and reset it. And because it was a holiday weekend, it was at holiday pay rates. So it was a $900 expense. But the power outage was not our fault, so. So anyway, getting back to the item at hand, each year the Independence Township Fire Inspector requires an annual inspection of the library's fire suppression system by a qualified contractor. We have this inspection conducted each year, but given the issues we have had with the system in recent years, we asked the company we've been working with more recently about following up the inspection with a proposal for preventative work that we could have done, that we can do to be proactive about all of this. In order to keep the system in good working order. After the inspection, Jim D'Angelo, the owner of the company, sat down with the lead custodian and myself to provide recommendations for work that he and his team feel would be valuable for maintenance, given the issues that we've had in the past. Together, we selected a list of tasks that we felt were important to do in the short term, and also recorded a few items that might be addressed in future years. So in the same way that we do our capital improvement plan, we listed things that ideally need to be done, and then said, oh yeah, these need to be done this year, and those could probably wait till next year. The included proposal includes the immediate tasks and totals $5,016. This is not a budgeted item in 2021, so budget adjustment would be needed. And as I said, in addition, there was this power outage, and that was a nearly $1,000 expense. But I wanted to lead in with that just because I knew that I wanted to put you in that kind of mindset of the system being armed, and that was why so fire protection that came in and did that as well. Okay, so these are not currently budgeted items. There is a $42,298 amount in undesignated revenue that could be used to cover these expenses. And then going forward, Arlene and I will make sure that we budget funds specifically for annual maintenance. So not only will we budget funds to pay for the inspection, but we'll budget a chunk of money that would be intended for whatever the inspector says needs to be done. Any questions on any of that?
I just have a comment. I worked for many years in the Pontiac School District, and we had roofs that came to a V over the library. And so when that was built, I'm sure it was quite attractive, but it created difficulties along I-beams when you had water buildup. And anything, librarians will tell you, we do not like water on the materials. So we have discussed over the years here these issues with water in fire suppression in a library. And we've had several companies that we have talked to, and given our building's configuration, they've discussed many ways, wet, dry, what can one do? And the consensus seems to be that we need to take what preventative measures we can, because overhauling the entire thing would be extremely prohibitive. Is that an
You
accurate?
hit the nail on the head with that, yes, you did. There is in this particular proposal, a proposal that a particular section of the building could be made a wet system that he feels would solve, no, that he feels it would solve some of the problems, but part of the problem is because it's a dry system, you get that condensation. And he felt that maybe if we could make a section of it wet, then we wouldn't be dealing with those air leaks, at least in that part of the building. We want to keep it dry over top of the books and those kinds of things. But in the attic area, it would be less of a big deal, and so he suggested, and I believe that he has included in here a small section that he would make a wet system. He said there was a place where he could separate it and make it a wet system. I will admit, though, I'm not sure if he meant to do that this year or next year. I know what he was really focusing on this particular year. Let me just double check and make sure.
I just want to share the fact that we've been discussing this for several times since this building was configured from a very small square space to the current library in 1992.
I do remember seeing that when I read this earlier about making a section of it, and I did wonder where that makes sense that it would be.
I think he's waiting to do that the next time. Everything that he's got in here is really preventative maintenance, so he's replacing valves. There are 2 sprinkler heads, so I'm trying to remember what year it was, 2008 maybe. The sprinkler heads throughout the entire building needed to be replaced, and essentially, they called it a recall, but essentially what it was the company did a redesign that they felt was better. And instead of requiring everybody to rebuy, they wanted people to use this new one. So they paid to replace all of them. But when they did that, they missed 2 of the sprinkler heads. Well, that company is no longer offering that fabulous deal where they'll replace them for us for free. So this includes those 2 sprinkler heads. This includes the faceplate on the gasket. It also includes the valves, or the actual valves that you turn in order to turn the system on and off. Which I can attest to the fact when I had to turn it off in an emergency, you have to have some serious hand strength to do that, and it's just because they're so old. There was one that I could do myself. There was another one that I literally had to call the fire inspector to come and turn it off for me because I could get up in there, but I did not have the hand strength to turn it. In an emergency, when there's water pouring out, there didn't happen to be quite that big of an emergency, but had it been, we need the people who actually work here, and most of us are smaller and maybe not as strong, we need to be able to turn it off ourselves. So everything that he's got on the list this time around is really we need to get this done right now, and in order to keep the price down. And next year, we'll be able to budget a little bit more. We'll sit down with him and make sure the budget accommodates it, so you're not seeing us coming to you and saying, well, unless there's an emergency, which the fire suppression system is just like that. We could budget an endless amount of money for the fire suppression system, and it would still surprise us.
So given all of that explanation,
Yes.
I'm going to accept a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the proposal from Absolute Fire Protection for repairs and maintenance to the fire suppression system and approve a budget adjustment of $6,000 from undesignated revenue to line 931, building and grounds maintenance.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the proposal from Absolute Fire Protection for repairs and maintenance to the fire suppression system and approve a budget adjustment of $6,000 from undesignated revenue to line 931. Any comments or questions about this? Seems like we dream about this system.
I know I do.
Not as much as Julie does, I'm sure.
Right. But for those of us who have occasionally spent a night in the library because the suppression system was off and somebody has to be here, that's kind of fun. It's kind of like a sleepover.
This is an adventure.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor, please say nay. Good. The ayes have it, and we will follow up with this. So the motion is passed,
Thank you.
and this will be looked at in the budget.
Yes, in 2022, we'll make sure we have budgeted amount for doing these kinds of repairs. We'll talk to Jim and make sure he gives us a ballpark for next year.
Okay. So we'll be proactive,
We'll be
as
proactive.
opposed to holding buckets.
Good plan.
Sorry, real quick. Sorry about that.
I will accept a motion at this time to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion carried. We're adjourned at 7:20. Good timing.
Perfect.